David sighed heavily and put his hands over his face. He slowly let them slide down until he could peek through the gaps of his fingers at the half-finished book report on his laptop. He groaned out loud looking at the word count. He wasn't even close. How on earth am I going to pull 640 more words out of this? He thought, his attention quickly waning. He had already done a masterful job of padding, fluffing, and absolute bullshitting to get to this far, and he didn't have much more left in him. David let his hands fall to his lap as he glanced at the time and internally winced. It was already 9:48 and he had to turn this in by midnight. Plus, they were going to go over it in class the next day too, so there was no way he could ask for an extension either. Why did I have to put this off until the last possible second? He chided himself, rhetorically of course. It was no mystery as to the reason he hadn't done this sooner. After all, those eldritch horrors in Yarnum weren't going to slay themselves. Grinning slightly while remembering the boss he finally killed last night, his thoughts were interrupted by the vibrations of his phone on the desk. The caller ID clearly announcing that his mother was calling. Happy to have any excuse to not keep writing his report, David reached over and answered. "Hey Mom," he said cheerfully, "what's up?"
"Hey bud, I was just thinking about you, and thought I should give you a call before I headed off to bed tonight."
She was up fairly late, considering she was an hour behind him. Her tone was somewhat concerned.
"Everything okay on your end? How are classes going?"
"They are going well," David answered. "I was just finishing up an essay for modern literature when you called actually."
"Oh good, I know you were worried about that class."
She paused for a moment. David felt as if something were off, but she continued.
"I assume your math class is still going well too?"
David bit his lip. "Yeah, I'm surviving. Though, I'm really regretting waiting a year to do Calc 2. I'm having to relearn so much stuff." They continued chatting about life, how classes and work were going, how things were back home, if anything exciting had happened in town, etc. After a few minutes of talking, the conversation died down a bit, leaving a semi-awkward silence on the line. David heard his mom sigh.
"Are you sure you're okay, hun?"
she asked after a few seconds. David finally understood why she had called and smiled slightly. His mom had a gift. He wasn't sure if it was a parent thing or just something unique to her, but sometimes it was otherworldly. No matter where he was or what time of day it was, David's mom somehow always knew when he was having a rough time or was in trouble. Always. Didn't matter if he was just down the street at a friend's house or several thousand miles away in a completely different country, she just knew. It had happened on multiple occasions, with her asking about things that he hadn't even mentioned to another living soul. It was low-key creepy, but also pretty comforting. He laughed softly. "Yes ma'am, I'm doing fine, honestly." David was actually being completely truthful this time. He had usually tried denying it at first, almost always unsuccessfully though, so he had given up trying to hide it from her. "Sure, some of my classes have been a little tough, but I'm managing just fine. Plus, tomorrow's Friday and I even have plans to go out with friends this weekend." "You remember Tyler and Carson, right? We're going with a couple other guys to a party on Saturday, so that should be pretty fun," David answered.
"Oh, that's awesome. You know how worried I get when you spend all weekend at home playing games,"
she said pointedly, and David winced instinctively as he remembered some of the arguments they'd had in the past. She wasn't really a fan of all the games he played and didn't understand how he could spend so much time playing them instead of going out. But she had eventually come to terms that she wasn't going to dissuade him. David also didn't feel the need to clarify that the party they were going to was basically just a big LAN party with all the guys he usually played with online. Yeah, Mom, I know. Don't worry, I'm trying to get out more. Seriously though, I'm alright. Nothing to worry about. David really couldn't think of anything. She didn't sound convinced, but she also sounded like she was starting to have trouble staying awake.
Okay, as long as you're sure.
David heard her stifle a yawn.
Text me this weekend though.
Yes, ma'am, I will. David responded with a smile, even though he was alone in his dorm.
Good. Well, I'm going to bed now. It's pretty late for me. Love you, bud. I'll talk to you later.
She yawned again. His mom was never what you'd call a night owl. Love you too, Mom. Good night. As he set his phone down, he suddenly felt a little nervous. It's not like she had never been wrong before, but his mom's track record at sensing when her children were in trouble was right more often than not. David thought hard, trying to remember if there actually was something bothering him that he hadn't considered. Lost in thought for a moment, his eyes wandered back up to his screen, where the time in the lower right displayed 10:14 p.m. He looked back at his word count. Oh, shit. About an hour later, David finally hit submit on his essay, as the clock ticked over to 11:58 p.m. Heh, just in time. He sat back and sighed. He was about 100 words short, and most of it was utter trash, but it was better than turning in nothing at all. He had class at 8 a.m. the next morning, so he decided against starting up any games tonight. He knew that if he did, he would really hate himself the next day. David quickly got ready for bed, changing into a comfy pair of sweats and a loose-fitting polyester t-shirt. As he came back into his room from brushing his teeth, he thought he saw something out his window, but he didn't give it any thought. His dorm overlooked a semi-busy road, so it wasn't unusual to have cars going by, even this late. He laid down in bed, turning off the lights and settling into the soft embrace of his blankets and sheets. As he drifted off to sleep, his mind wandered. He only had a few classes tomorrow, with nothing major beside the essay review in literature. Then he was home free to the weekend. He made a mental note to brush up on his Halo skills tomorrow evening, since he knew they'd be playing on Saturday. And David wanted to make sure he could thoroughly kick his friend's collective ass. He smiled at the thought as he felt himself slipping off to sleep. Author's account and link to original text is in the description.